A poor farmer's act of mercy toward two Apache giants would trigger a chain of events that no soul in the territory could have foreseen, and what their chief decided the next morning would either forge peace or ignite the bloodiest war the frontier had ever witnessed. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if you're ready for a tale that'll shake you to your very core. The year was 1847, deep in the heart of Arizona territory, where the scorching sun painted the mesa tops crimson and the wind carried whispers of ancient spirits through the sagebrush. Sam McGrath owned nothing more than a weathered cabin, a handful of cattle, and a patch of stubborn land that barely yielded enough corn to keep his family from starvation. His calloused hands told the story of a man who'd fought tooth and nail against drought, raiders, and the unforgiving wilderness that stretched endlessly beyond his rickety fence. But Sam possessed something rarer than gold in those lawless days, a heart that couldn't turn away from suffering, no matter the color of skin or the language spoken. The Old West was built on stories of courage and compassion, where ordinary folks faced extraordinary choices that would echo through generations. Cowboys, farmers, and drifters alike knew that in this harsh land, your character was measured not by the size of your spread, but by the depth of your mercy when tested by fire. On that fateful evening, as purple shadows crept across the canyon walls like ghostly fingers, Sam would encounter two souls whose very presence would challenge everything he believed about survival, loyalty, and the thin line between civilization and chaos. These weren't ordinary travelers seeking shelter, they were Apache sisters, towering figures whose warrior blood ran as deep as the Colorado River, and whose desperate flight from their own people would soon drag Sam into a conflict that would test the limits of human compassion. Little did this humble farmer know that his next decision would either save two lives and forge an unlikely alliance, or doom his entire family to a fate worse than the desert graves that dotted the unforgiving landscape of the American frontier. The first drops of rain in 3 months were just beginning to darken the dust when Sam heard the sound. Hoofbeats thundering toward his homestead like the devil himself was giving chase. Through the gathering twilight, two massive figures materialized from the heat shimmer, their horses lathered with sweat and foam. These weren't the typical Apache raiders he'd heard stories about in town. These were women, but built like warriors, each standing nearly 6 feet tall with shoulders that spoke of lives spent drawing bowstrings and wielding war clubs. Their buckskin clothing hung in tatters, stained with blood that could have been their own or their enemies'. War paint streaked their faces in patterns Sam had never seen before, not the traditional designs of warfare, but something else entirely, something that spoke of exile and desperation. The elder sister's eyes burned with the intensity of a cornered mountain lion, while the younger one swayed in her saddle, clearly wounded and fighting to stay conscious. Sam's hand instinctively moved to the rifle leaning against his porch post, but something in their posture stopped him cold. These weren't attackers, they were refugees, fleeing from something that had driven them to seek help from their traditional enemies. The older sister raised her hand in what could have been either a gesture of peace or a final act of defiance, her voice cutting through the evening air with words in Apache that Sam couldn't understand, but whose meaning was crystal clear: help us, or we die. But what Sam didn't realize was that helping them would mean crossing a line from which there could be no return. Sam's wife Martha appeared in the doorway, her flour-dusted hands gripping the frame as she took in the sight of these towering Apache women. In the Old West, showing mercy to your enemies was often seen as signing your own death warrant, but Sam had learned long ago that survival sometimes meant making choices that defied conventional wisdom. The younger sister suddenly pitched forward, sliding from her horse like a felled tree, blood pooling beneath her in the dust. Without a word, Sam stepped forward, his weathered hands moving with the practiced efficiency of a man who'd doctored both cattle and humans in his time. The elder sister tensed, her hand moving to the knife at her belt, but Sam's gentle approach to her fallen sister spoke louder than any words could have. Martha, reading the situation with the intuition of a frontier woman, disappeared inside and returned with clean cloth and water. As Sam knelt beside the wounded Apache, he could see the severity of her injuries: 3 arrow wounds, not from white men's weapons, but from her own people. The realization hit him like a physical blow. These women weren't just fleeing from settlers or cavalry, they were running from their own tribe. The elder sister, seeing Sam's recognition, spoke in broken English for the first time. "We, betrayed. Cast out. You help or desert take us." The weight of the moment settled over the homestead like storm clouds gathering on the horizon. Sam knew that harboring Apache fugitives could mean death for his entire family, but looking into the eyes of these desperate women, he also knew that turning them away would mean betraying everything he believed about human decency. But the choice Sam was about to make would soon reach the ears of someone who held the power of life and death over the entire territory. Through the long night, Sam and Martha worked to save the younger sister's life, their small cabin transformed into a makeshift surgery. The elder sister, who finally revealed her name as Ayana, meaning eternal blossom, stood guard by the window, her massive frame silhouetted against the flickering candlelight. She spoke little, but her eyes never left Sam's hands as he carefully extracted arrowheads and cleaned wounds with the kind of gentle precision that spoke of a man who understood that all life was sacred. The younger sister, Exiled, meaning Rainbow Lady, drifted in and out of consciousness, mumbling words in Apache that caused Ayana's face to tighten with what looked like both pain and pride. Sam couldn't understand their language, but he recognized the tone. These were words of defiance, of a choice made that could never be undone. As dawn broke over the mesa, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Exeld's fever finally broke, and her breathing steadied. It was then that Ayana finally shared their story, her English halting but filled with raw emotion. They had dared to speak against their war chief's plan to massacre a peaceful settlement of Mexican families who had shown kindness to Apache children during a harsh winter. When they refused to participate in the raid, they were branded as traitors and sentenced to death, but not before being forced to watch as warriors painted themselves for the very battle they had tried to prevent. Sam felt the ground shift beneath his feet as he realized the magnitude of what these women had sacrificed. They hadn't just risked their lives to save strangers, they had given up everything, their home, their people, their identity, to stand on the side of mercy in a world that rewarded only strength and ruthlessness. But unknown to Sam, riders were already spreading word of his unusual guests, and soon that news would reach the one man whose reaction would determine the fate of everyone involved. 50 miles away, in a hidden canyon where smoke from cooking fires mingled with the morning mist, Chief Nailnish received news that struck him like a physical blow. His own daughters, the pride of his warrior bloodline, women he had trained personally in the arts of war and wisdom, were not only alive but being sheltered by a white farmer. The messenger, a young brave named Kicking Bear, knelt before his chief with words that would have been unthinkable just days before. Nailnish had built his reputation on unwavering strength and absolute loyalty to Apache traditions, but these were his children, born of his beloved wife who had died defending their village from cavalry raids 15 years prior. The internal war raging in his chest was unlike any battle he had ever fought. The chief who demanded absolute obedience from his people now faced the impossible choice between justice and mercy, between tribal law and paternal love. His war council gathered around the sacred fire, their faces painted with the gravity of the moment. Some called for immediate retaliation against both the farmer and the traitorous daughters, arguing that mercy shown to defectors would encourage others to question the chief's authority. Others, older warriors who had known the girls since birth, spoke quietly of the honor these women had shown in choosing conscience over convenience, even at the cost of everything they held dear. As the sun climbed higher and the shadows shortened, Nailnish made a decision that would ripple through Apache history like stones cast into still water. He would ride to the farmer's homestead not with a war party, but with a small group of his most trusted advisors, and there he would face his daughters and the man who had shown them mercy. But what no one could have predicted was the revelation that would emerge when father and daughters finally stood face to face. Sam was tending to his cattle when the dust cloud appeared on the horizon, moving with the deliberate pace of men who were not in flight but approaching with purpose. Through his spyglass, he counted 6 riders, their posture and formations speaking of military discipline rather than raiding party chaos. Ayana, who had been helping Martha with morning chores, froze when she spotted the familiar silhouettes against the morning sky. "Father," she whispered, the single word carrying more weight than a war cry. Sam felt his blood turn to ice water as he realized that the most feared Apache war chief in the territory was approaching his humble homestead. Itzel, still weak from her wounds but able to stand, moved to her sister's side, and together they formed a wall of defiance that spoke of women prepared to face whatever consequences awaited them. Martha gathered their children and moved them inside, while Sam checked his rifle and positioned himself on the porch. But Ayanna shook her head, her massive hand gently pushing down the barrel of his weapon. "No guns," she said firmly. "This, family matter. You show respect, maybe we all live to see sunset." The approaching riders slowed as they neared the homestead, their leader's face a mask of controlled emotion that revealed nothing of the storm brewing within. Chief Nailnish dismounted with the fluid grace of a man half his age, his eagle feathers catching the morning light as he studied the scene before him. His eyes moved from his daughters to the white farmer who had risked everything to save them, and in that moment, three worlds, Apache tradition, frontier survival, and human compassion, collided with the force of thunder rolling across the desert. But the words that would be spoken in the next few minutes would determine whether this meeting would end in bloodshed or forge an alliance that no one could have imagined. The silence that stretched between chief and daughters was heavier than the desert air before a thunderstorm. Nailnish spoke first, his words in Apache carrying the weight of both authority and anguish. Ayanna responded with equal intensity, her voice never wavering even as tears carved tracks through the dust on her weathered cheeks. Sam couldn't understand their language, but he could feel the raw emotion flowing between them like an electric current. Itzel, still pale from blood loss but standing straight as a warrior, stepped forward and spoke words that caused her father's composure to crack for just an instant. Sam caught fragments of English mixed with Apache, words like innocent children, honor, and conscience, and began to piece together the magnitude of what these women had sacrificed. They hadn't just defied a war chief, they had defied their own father, choosing moral courage over filial loyalty. Chief Nailnish turned his attention to Sam, his dark eyes studying the farmer with the intensity of a hawk evaluating potential prey. When he spoke in English, his voice carried an accent thick as morning fog but clear in its meaning. "You heal my daughters. You risk your family for Apache blood. Why?" The question hung in the air like smoke from a sacred fire, demanding an answer that could mean the difference between life and death for everyone present. Sam met the chief's gaze without flinching, his calloused hands steady at his sides. "Because they were hurt and needed help," he said simply. "Same reason I'd help anyone, regardless of who they are or where they come from. Out here, we're all just trying to survive, and sometimes survival means helping each other instead of fighting." The words were plain, spoken without flourish or calculation, but they carried the ring of absolute truth. What happened next would challenge everything everyone thought they knew about enemies, allies, and the bonds that truly define family. Chief Nailnish walked slowly around the homestead, his trained warrior's eyes taking in every detail, the modest cabin, the struggling crops, the evidence of a family living on the razor's edge between survival and starvation. His daughters watched him with the tension of deer sensing a predator, knowing that their fate hung in the balance of their father's judgment. The other Apache warriors remained mounted but alert, their hands never far from their weapons. When the chief finally spoke again, his words were directed at his daughters but spoken in English so that Sam would understand the gravity of the moment. "Apache law says traitors must die," he began, his voice heavy with the weight of tradition. "But Apache law also says father must protect daughters, even when daughters choose path of dishonor." The contradiction in his words was as sharp as a blade, cutting through the morning air with surgical precision. Ayanna stepped forward, her massive frame towering even over her father, and when she spoke, her voice carried the authority of a woman who had found her true strength. "We choose honor over obedience, father. Children of Mexican village live because we refuse to paint hands with innocent blood. If this is dishonor to Apache, then we accept exile with pride." Her sister nodded in agreement, their united front presenting a wall of conviction that even a war chief could not easily breach. Sam watched this family drama unfold with growing understanding of the impossible position these women had placed themselves in. They had chosen to save the lives of strangers at the cost of their own heritage, their own people, their own father's approval. It was a level of moral courage that humbled the simple farmer and forced him to question whether he would have had the strength to make such a sacrifice. But Chief Nailnish's next words would reveal a wisdom that ran deeper than tribal law and older than the desert stones. The sun reached its zenith as Chief Nailnish made a decision that would echo through Apache oral tradition for generations to come. Instead of pronouncing judgment, he asked a question that cut to the heart of everything his people believed about strength, survival, and the meaning of true warrior spirit. "Tell me, daughters," he said, his voice softening for the first time since his arrival, "what makes stronger warrior, one who kills innocent because chief commands, or one who saves innocent because heart commands?" The question hung in the desert air like morning mist, transforming the entire nature of the confrontation. This wasn't just about tribal law versus individual conscience, it was about the very definition of honor itself. Itzel, finding strength despite her wounds, spoke with the clarity of someone who had looked death in the face and emerged with unshakable conviction. "Strong warrior protects those who cannot protect themselves, father. Weak warrior follows orders that shame the spirits of our ancestors." Chief Nailnish nodded slowly, and Sam began to see glimpses of the wisdom that had made this man a leader of his people. The chief had not come here to punish his daughters. He had come to understand them, to see if their defiance came from weakness or from a strength he had failed to recognize. The other warriors shifted in their saddles, sensing that their leader was navigating waters none of them had charted before. With deliberate movements, Chief Nailnish removed a silver bracelet from his wrist, a piece that Sam would later learn had belonged to the girl's mother, worn by the chief as a reminder of love that transcended even death. He placed it in Ayana's massive palm, his fingers lingering for a moment in a gesture that spoke of forgiveness, pride, and the complex bonds that tie families together even across philosophical divides. But the chief's final decision would prove to be more revolutionary than anyone could have imagined. What Chief Nailnish proposed next shattered every convention of frontier warfare and Apache tribal politics. Looking directly at Sam, he made an offer that no white settler in Arizona Territory had ever received. "You save my daughters, show mercy when you could show fear. Apache law says debt must be repaid. You need protection from other tribes, from bandits, from cavalry who might not understand peaceful farmer. I offer alliance. My warriors guard your land, your family, in exchange for safe place where my daughters can heal their spirits." Sam's mind reeled at the implications of such an arrangement. An alliance with Apache meant protection from raiders and hostile tribes, but it also meant that any cavalry patrol or territorial militia might see him as a collaborator with the enemy. The risk was enormous, but so was the potential for peace in a land where violence had become as common as morning dew. Martha appeared in the doorway, her intuitive understanding of the situation clear in her eyes as she nodded almost imperceptibly to her husband. Ayana and Itzel exchanged glances that spoke of sisters who had found something they thought they had lost forever: acceptance from their father and a chance to build a new life without abandoning their principles. The younger sister stepped forward, still favoring her wounded side, and spoke words that would become legend among the Apache. "We serve as bridge between worlds, father." Apache wisdom, white compassion, joined together like rivers meeting in canyon. The handshake between Chief Nailnish and Sam McGrath was witnessed by warriors who would carry the story back to their village, where it would spark debates, inspire songs, and ultimately change the way the Apache viewed the possibility of coexistence with their white neighbors. Two strong hands, one weathered by farm work and one marked by battle scars, clasped in an agreement that would protect both their peoples. But the true test of this unprecedented alliance was about to arrive in the form of visitors neither side had expected. 3 days after the alliance was forged, a cavalry patrol of 20 soldiers approached the McGrath homestead, their blue uniforms and military bearing a stark contrast to the peaceful scene they encountered. Captain Morrison, a career military man with little patience for what he called Apache sympathizers, had received reports of unusual activity in the area and came prepared for conflict. What he found instead was Sam working alongside Apache warriors to repair a broken windmill, their cooperation so natural it might have been happening for years. The captain's demand was simple and non-negotiable: surrender the Apache prisoners for transport to the reservation, or be arrested as collaborators with hostile Indians. Sam felt the weight of every choice he had made leading up to this moment, knowing that his next words would either preserve the fragile peace he had helped create or destroy it entirely. Behind him, he could sense Ayanna and Itzel preparing for what might be their final stand, their warrior training taking over even as they remained committed to the path of peace they had chosen. Chief Nailnish emerged from the barn where he had been discussing plans for joint hunting expeditions with Sam's neighbors, his presence immediately shifting the entire dynamic of the confrontation. The captain's hand moved instinctively to his sidearm, but the chief's posture remained relaxed, diplomatic, a leader seeking dialogue rather than dominance. When he spoke, his words were carefully chosen to demonstrate respect for military authority while firmly establishing the legitimacy of the alliance. "Captain," Nailnish said in English that had grown more confident with each passing day, "we come in peace, seeking way to live alongside white neighbors without bloodshed. My daughters choose to build bridges, not burn them. This farmer risks much to help Apache family heal old wounds. Is this not what great white chief in Washington desires? Peace between peoples?" The captain's response would determine whether this experiment in coexistence would survive its first real test or crumble under the weight of prejudice and military protocol. Captain Morrison's face flushed red as he struggled between military duty and the growing realization that he was witnessing something unprecedented in the bloody history of the Apache Wars. His orders were clear: apprehend any hostile Indians found off the reservation and arrest any civilians who aided them. But the scene before him defied every category his training had prepared him for. These weren't hostile raiders or desperate refugees, but families working together with a cooperation that seemed to mock the very foundations of frontier conflict. The tension reached its breaking point when one of the younger soldiers, nervous and trigger-happy, raised his rifle toward Ayanna as she moved to protect her wounded sister. In that instant, Sam stepped directly between the weapon and the Apache woman, his own body becoming a shield that declared his allegiance more powerfully than any words could have. "You'll have to shoot through me first, soldier," he said quietly, his voice carrying the absolute conviction of a man who had found something worth dying for. Chief Nailnish raised his hand, stopping his own warriors who had begun reaching for their weapons, and spoke with the authority of a leader who had spent decades navigating the treacherous waters of war and diplomacy. "Captain, you see before you choice that will echo through history. You can arrest peaceful Apaches seeking new way to live, making martyrs and ensuring more years of bloodshed. Or you can be man who helped forge first real peace between our peoples." The captain's internal struggle played out across his weathered features as he weighed duty against conscience, military protocol against the possibility of genuine peace. Around him, his soldiers waited for orders that would either escalate this encounter into violence or mark the beginning of a new chapter in frontier relations. The desert wind held its breath as if nature itself was waiting to see which path would be chosen. What Captain Morrison decided in that moment would become the turning point not just for the McGrath family and Chief Nailnish's people, but for the entire territory's future. Captain Morrison holstered his weapon and made a decision that would require him to face his commanding officers with a report unlike any they had ever received. "Stand down, men," he ordered, his voice carrying newfound respect for the complex situation he had discovered. "We're not here to break up peaceful cooperation between citizens and neighbors." His pause before the word neighbors spoke volumes about the mental adjustment he was making in real time. The alliance between the McGrath family and Chief Nailnish's band became a model that other settlements throughout the territory would eventually follow, proving that coexistence was not only possible but profitable for all involved. Sam's farm flourished under Apache protection, while the tribe benefited from trade relationships and agricultural knowledge that helped them adapt to changing times without abandoning their cultural identity. Ayanna and Itzel grew into legendary figures among both their own people and the white settlers, known as the Bridge Sisters, who had chosen conscience over comfort and helped forge a new way of living on the frontier. Their story was told around campfires and in town squares, inspiring others to look beyond racial divisions and see the humanity in former enemies. Chief Nailnish lived to see his daughters honored by both Apache councils and territorial governors, their courage ultimately vindicating his own revolutionary choice to support them. Years later, when historians wrote about the end of the Apache Wars, they would point to that moment when a poor farmer chose mercy over safety, when two Apache sisters chose conscience over tribal loyalty, and when their father chose wisdom over tradition. The McGrath homestead became a symbol of what was possible when people dared to see beyond the artificial barriers that divided them and recognize the common humanity that united them all. The desert remembers everything, and in the whispers of wind through canyon walls, you can still hear echoes of the day when courage changed the course of history. Sometimes the greatest victories are won not with guns or horses, but with open hearts and extended hands, offering hope where once there was only fear. What choice would you have made in Sam's position? Safety for your family or mercy for strangers who could have been enemies? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories of courage from the Old West that prove heroes come in all colors and speak all languages.